The title was always the interlude. Meghan's return to authenticity. The title was the interlude. The interruption. The brief and oddly formal chapter in a story that was always about something else entirely. Meghan Markle built a platform that reached 3 million people by writing about purpose and connection and the daily work of building a life that meant something beyond its surface markers. She did not stumble into visibility. She created it. She worked on a television show for 7 years and turned that visibility into a conversation about what mattered to her and what might matter to the women reading her words at midnight on a laptop or during a lunch break scrolling on a phone. She visited women's shelters and engaged with causes, and showed up in rooms where her presence carried weight, not because of a title bestowed by an institution, but because she had spent years making choices that said, "This is who I am, and this is what I care about." The Duchess of Sussex was a role she agreed to play. Meg was always who she was, and when she closed the TIG to join the royal family, she was not stepping into her power. She was stepping sideways into a structure that would spend years trying to diminish the power she had already built and wielded entirely on her own terms. The woman in the pottery workshop in Melbourne saying, "Call me Meg," is not rejecting anything. She is continuing. She's returning. She's standing in a room full of people who wanted to meet her not because of what she's called, but because of who she has always been. The incident at the Veterans Art Museum. When the Poet Laureate at the Australian National Veterans Art Museum asked Harry and Meghan how he should address them, Harry shrugged and said, "However you like," and Meghan said, "Call me Meg." 3 words, an invitation, a signal of ease and accessibility. The British press responded as though she had committed an act of constitutional vandalism. The framing in multiple outlets suggested this was somehow inappropriate, that she should be using her title, that declining to insist on Duchess of Sussex in a Veterans Art Museum pottery workshop was a sign of something problematic. This from the same press that has spent years complaining that Meghan is too grand, too aware of her own status, too focused on the trappings of royalty and not enough on genuine service. She uses the title, and she is obsessed with status. She does not use the title, and she is disrespecting the institution. She is damned if she does, and she is damned if she does not. And that is precisely the point. The damning is not about the title. The damning is the function. The specific and constant mechanism by which every choice Meghan makes is processed through a frame that has been preset to produce a negative conclusion regardless of the input. The impossible standard. She uses the title, and she is obsessed with status. She does not use the title, and she is disrespecting the institution. She is damned if she does, and she is damned if she does not. And that is precisely the point. The damning is not about the title. The damning is the function. The specific and constant mechanism by which every choice Meghan makes is processed through a frame that has been preset to produce a negative conclusion regardless of the input. Title used. Problem. Title not used. Problem. Dress too formal. Problem. Dress too casual. Problem. Too many engagements. Exhausting people. Too few engagements. Not working hard enough. Paid appearances. Using Australia like an ATM. Free appearances. Seeking attention without the substance to justify it. The frame never changes, only the specific complaint changes to fit whatever she has actually done. Building a platform. Before the Crown she had the TIG, a lifestyle and values blog that she ran from 2014 to 2017. It had 3 million readers. She was writing about food and travel and women and culture and the specific intersection of wellness and purpose and the life well lived. She was using her platform from Suits, a show she worked on for 7 years in the demanding daily grind of television production, to talk about the things she cared about. She was already visiting women's shelters and engaging with causes and showing up in the spaces where her presence could mean something. She did not need a title to have a platform. She had built one. She gave up the TIG when she became engaged to Harry because the institutional requirements of joining the royal family made it incompatible with the kind of personal house and commercial independence the blog represented. She walked away from a 3 million reader platform and a professional identity she had built entirely on her own terms to serve an institution that then spent years briefing against her. The sacrifice for the institution. She gave up the TIG when she became engaged to Harry because the institutional requirements of joining the royal family made it incompatible with the kind of personal voice and commercial independence the blog represented. She walked away from a 3 million reader platform and a professional identity she had built entirely on her own terms to serve an institution that then spent years briefing against her. That is the part that sits uncomfortably when you look at the Pottery Workshop, outrage with any historical memory at all. She made the sacrifice the institution required. She closed the thing she had created. She stepped back from the commercial autonomy and the unfiltered voice that had connected her to millions of people who read her words because they wanted to, not because protocol demanded they pay attention. And the institution she made that sacrifice for turned around and spent years telling journalists she was difficult, that she was demanding, that she had unrealistic expectations, that she did not understand how things worked. The very things she gave up to join them were later used as evidence that she had never belonged in the first place. Who actually cared about the title? The women at Macaulay House did not see a duchess or a former royal or a tabloid villain or whatever construction had been placed around her by people who had never been in the same room with her. They saw a person who sat down at a pottery wheel and asked questions and listened to answers and treated the moment like it mattered, because to her it did. Joseph and Lily did not respond to a title or a position in some institutional hierarchy that meant nothing in the context of their actual lives. They responded to her genuine presence and warmth, to the specific quality of attention she gave them that signaled she was there not to be seen, but to see them. The poet laureate's question about how to address her was answered with authentic accessibility, and his response was not confusion or offence, but ease. He got what he was asking for: permission to treat the interaction as human rather than ceremonial. The people in that room were not confused about what was happening. The British press was confused, or pretending to be, which tells you everything about who the performance was actually for. The meaning behind "Call Me Meg." It was an act of respect and a desire for genuine connection. When Meghan said "Call me Meg," she was not diminishing herself or the institution she married into. She was recognizing that in a pottery workshop with veterans and community members, the most valuable currency is not protocol, but presence. She was making a choice to meet people where they were, rather than requiring them to navigate the complex social choreography of royal address. It represented a return to her authentic self, not the self before Harry. Not the self stripped of experience or growth or the weight of what she has lived through, but the self that existed before the title became the only lens through which she was permitted to be seen. The woman who ran a 3 million reader blog and showed up at women's shelters and built a career and a platform on her own terms. That person did not disappear when she became the Duchess of Sussex. The title was layered on top. And in that room in Melbourne, she was simply peeling back one layer to reveal what had always been underneath. It demonstrated healthy human interaction in a formal setting. Someone asked a respectful question about how to address her. She gave a gracious answer that prioritized comfort and connection over hierarchy. That is not a breach of decorum. That is decorum functioning exactly as it should. The purpose of manners is to make people feel at ease. The purpose of respect is to honor the humanity of the people in front of you. Meghan did both. And the fact that this straightforward moment of social grace was turned into a scandal tells you everything you need to know about the machinery that processes her every move. The woman who built her own platform. She was a self-made professional with a global platform before the title ever entered her life, before anyone thought to place Duchess in front of her name or suggest that her worth was contingent on an institutional designation she had no part in creating. The title was a temporary institutional interlude, a brief chapter in a longer story that began long before palace walls and will continue long after them. A detour through someone else's machinery that tried to redefine a person who had already spent years defining herself. She remains the same person the Australians were delighted to meet in that pottery workshop, the same woman who built the Tig from nothing and walked away from it when circumstances required. The same woman who knows exactly who she is, whether the British press acknowledges it or not, and who understands that a title is something you wear and a self is something you are. And only one of those things matters when you're sitting across from a 4-year-old with a pink knitted flower or a veteran trying to express something difficult through clay.